Tales of Veldrith. Book 3, The Quest of the Seeress. Episode 25, The Road North. The cold was sharper in the north, biting with a relentless chill that wrapped around Eira like a second skin. The wind howled through the trees as if the spirits of the wilderness were lamenting her journey. Snow-covered pines lined the narrow path, their branches weighed down by ice. The frozen world was utterly still, save for the crunch of Eira's boots as she pushed forward, her cloak whipping behind her. She had left with purpose, but doubt tugged at her heels. This was more than she had bargained for, a voyage into unknown lands, away from the safety of Jorvik. And for what? A word from the Seeress that may or may not bring her closer to Vestinus. Still, she pressed on. If there was even a chance that the Seeress spoke true, Eira would see it through. The icy path grew steeper, winding toward a frozen ridge. Her breath fogged the air as she paused to scan the landscape below. The forest stretched out endlessly, a sea of white and green fading into the distant grey of the sky. Somewhere behind her, the distant howl of wolves cut through the wind. She frowned.
Wolves this far north?
It wasn't unheard of, but something in the sound unsettled her. She tightened her grip on her bow and continued forward, her steps cautious now. If the wolves were desperate enough to wander this close, she knew better than to assume she'd be left alone. As the path narrowed, the sound of a low growl reached her ears, close, too close. Eira froze, her hand instinctively reaching for an arrow. She turned slowly, her heart quickening as a pair of glowing eyes emerged from the brush. A wolf, massive, its fur bristling with frost, stepped into view. Its breath steamed in the cold air, and its teeth gleamed white as it snarled. It was not alone. 2 more wolves flanked it, their sleek forms circling like shadows on the snow. Eira nocked an arrow, her muscles tensing.
I don't have time for this,
she muttered, aiming at the lead wolf. The creature lunged, and Eira released the arrow with a snap of the bowstring. The arrow struck true, embedding itself in the wolf's shoulder. The beast yelped and staggered, but the others charged without hesitation. Eira leapt aside as one wolf's claws raked through the snow where she had been standing. She drew her sword in a swift motion, the blade gleaming as she spun and slashed. The second wolf snarled as the blade bit into its side, red staining the pristine snow. The lead wolf, injured but enraged, circled again, foam at the edges of its mouth. Eira's breath came in steady bursts, her gaze fixed. The ley lines beneath the earth thrummed faintly in her periphery, a rhythmic pulse that steadied her nerves. She parried the next attack and drove her blade deep into the creature's flank. With a final, pitiful whine, it crumpled into the snow. The remaining wolf hesitated, its golden eyes narrowing before it backed away and disappeared into the shadows. Eira watched it go, breathing heavily as she wiped her blade clean.
They are getting desperate,
she murmured.
The north is colder than I thought.
The sun began to dip behind the hills, casting long, jagged shadows across the snow. Eira pressed on, following the path outlined in Skjorn's journal. The blacksmith's grandfather had mapped this road years ago, detailing hidden landmarks and forgotten resting places. After hours of travel, she came across one of those landmarks, a stone archway buried halfway in the snow. It was carved with runes so old that even the weathering seemed ancient. She brushed away the frost with her gloved hand, revealing faint etchings that glowed faintly with leyline energy. Eira whispered the words aloud, though their meaning eluded her. The runes pulsed faintly, responding to the sound of her voice. The sensation reminded her of Vestinus, his quiet reverence for ancient things, his belief that words carried weight even when their meanings were long forgotten. She stepped beneath the arch, her boots crunching in the untouched snow. On the other side, the path widened into a narrow valley bordered by high ridges. The shadows deepened as night approached, and the bitter cold bit through her cloak. She paused and lit a small torch, the flickering flame casting a dim, warm glow. Her destination was close. She could feel it, the way the air seemed to hum with something more than cold. As Eira rounded a bend, she spotted the remains of a camp nestled against the valley wall. A ring of charred stones marked where a fire had once burned, though the snow had reclaimed most of it. Scattered around the stones were remnants of supplies, an overturned iron pot, a few broken arrows, and a half-buried satchel. Eira approached carefully, her sword drawn. Whoever had camped here had left in a hurry, or not at all. She crouched and sifted through the satchel, finding a waterlogged journal with faded pages. She flipped through it, but most of the entries were smudged or illegible. One fragment stood out, scrawled in shaky handwriting.
Beware the whispering frost. It waits beneath the stone.
Eira frowned, the words settling like ice in her veins. Whatever had happened here, it hadn't been wolves or the elements alone. The ley lines here felt fractured, disturbed. A soft sound, a whisper of snow shifting, caught her attention. She turned sharply, her torchlight catching a glint of movement near the ridge above. A figure moved swiftly, their forms silhouetted against the twilight sky. They were tall, wrapped in furs, and carried a spear.
Who's there?
Eira called, raising her sword. The figure paused for a heartbeat before turning and vanishing over the ridge. Eira's grip tightened. Whoever they were, they didn't belong here any more than she did. But one thing was certain. They had been watching her. She adjusted her pack, the journal fragment still clutched in her hand. If the path to the Seeress had already drawn such strange watchers, she could only imagine what awaited her. With one last glance at the ruined camp, she pressed forward into the gathering dark. The Seeress's task loomed ahead, and the North's whispers promised more trials before she reached the shore. But Eira wasn't one to be turned back by shadows, not when she was this close to finding answers.
Thank you for listening to The Tales of Veldrith. Books 1 and 2 are now available in paperback and on Kindle. Visit mattytaylor.com for more details.